We've already talked about the Harrisburg substation and that project. In reliability planning, again, we have the ability to look strategically out 5, 10, 15 years, address upcoming concerns well in advance of those. So from a system-wide perspective, the solution may not come from right here in Henry County. It could come from Rush County or Decatur County or Bartholomew County, because we're all interconnected into one grid here in the Midwest. We're all part of one large intercontinental system. So whenever we help each other, I think that benefits the smaller region. And where we look at Henry County REMC, that's where we see the greatest value of a G&T right now.
Welcome to the Power Hour, the official podcast of Henry County REMC. Our cooperative proudly brings reliable, safe electricity to Henry and parts of Fayette, Rush, Hancock, Delaware, Madison, Randolph, and Wayne counties. We're more than just an electric co-op. We're a community-driven force, powered by the people we serve. People like you. We're back for another episode of the Power Hour. I'm Andrea, and I thank you for tuning in today. I've been looking forward to today's conversation as we have a very special guest in the studio. I'd like to welcome Blake Kleaving to the podcast. Blake is Manager of Member Solutions at Hoosier Energy. Hi, Blake.
Hi, Andrea. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you so much for coming in and joining us. Very excited to have you here. To our listeners, our members, if you're listening and you've heard of Hoosier Energy, but you still don't quite know who they are or what the connection is between Henry County REMC and Hoosier Energy, well, no worries, because we are going to dive into all of that today. So, Blake, let's get started. Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your role at Hoosier Energy?
Yes, definitely. Well, a little bit about myself. So I grew up in southern Indiana, just outside Tell City, along the river, the Ohio River. I was a co-op kid growing up. My grandfather on my maternal side was an REC, Southern Indiana REC board of director. And then my dad growing up is a director for Southern Indiana Power. So I grew up with co-ops, calling bingo at annual meetings from the time I was about 12 years old. And my career springboarded off of that. After several internships, working for Hoosier Energy as an intern, I went out east to Cooperative Finance Corporation, worked for them for a summer. Actually, I've worked for 2 distribution co-ops, much like Henry County, Davies Martin REMC, and Corn Belt Energy in Central Illinois, before winding up in my current role for the past 6 years. My wife and I live in Santa Claus, Indiana. So if you've been to Holiday World, we're just right across the road.
Cool.
We live there, expecting our first child here in 3 weeks.
Congratulations.
So we're really close. So making the trip up to Henry County was a blast today and getting to see this part of the state. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So you are a co-op guy through and through from childhood. That's really cool. Let's talk about Hoosier Energy. For those listening who really don't know, what is Hoosier Energy and what role does it play for the co-ops in our region?
Yeah, so just a little history on Hoosier Energy. So if we go back to whenever distribution co-ops like Henry County REMC were formed in the 1930s and 1940s, they were really at that time building distribution lines to serve end-of-the-line consumers, so farmers, rural community members. And one thing that was occurring in those early days was they still had to buy their bulk power, their wholesale power energy from investor-owned utilities. So at that time, you could think of Duke Energy or CenterPoint or AES. They had different names back then, but they were investor-owned. What ended up happening was distribution co-ops really thought through, this is, power's expensive. We're low priority on this list because they have customers, the investor-owned do, that they have to serve before they got to the co-ops. And around the end of the 1940s, a group of co-ops actually met in Rush County at a diner, and they started talking about the idea of what if we create our own co-op of co-ops, right? A generation and transmission utility that would be a co-op owned by distribution utilities that would build power plants, secure resources, go out and purchase bulk power or produce it to then serve distribution co-ops. And that is where Hoosier Energy was created just down the road in Rush County. Since then, we've grown. We now serve 17 member co-ops, much like Henry County REMC, across southern Indiana, central Indiana, and southeast Illinois. Our membership is included in those 17 members about 300,000 meters, 760,000 end consumers, with a wide variety of both residential and commercial industrial load. So our members that we serve are those 17 distribution co-ops like Henry County REMC, and then their members are the end consumers, residential, commercial, industrial. Boar's Head, for an example, is Henry County's member. So that's a little bit about Hoosier Energy's background and where we kind of came from the start.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that overview. That history is really cool to know. I love hearing the stories about where it all came from. And we are actually celebrating our 90th year here at Henry County REMC. So we're excited to try to bring a lot of that.
That's awesome.
Thank you. We're excited to bring that history and those stories to our members. So it's good to know Hoosier Energy's history as well. Let's get in a little more to how a G&T, a generation and transmission co-op, is different from an investor-owned utility that's not a co-op when it comes to their priorities, planning, accountability, that sort of thing. What makes you guys different?
Yes, I'm going to focus on Henry County for a second to kind of help translate to how that moves into Hoosier Energy. So at the local level, Henry County RMC has a locally elected board of directors that are community members. They're not full-time employees of the co-op. They're elected by their peers in the community to serve on that board and make decisions for Henry County RMC, along with the staff and CEO. Hoosier Energy is the exact same. So we actually have 17 board members from across all of our 17 member co-ops that meet monthly at Hoosier Energy, and they make decisions that help us with our strategic planning. What does our future portfolio look like? What type of initiatives do we drive? And so much like Henry County RMC is a not-for-profit, Hoosier Energy is as well. So how we differ from investor-owns, an investor-owned utility will actually focus a lot on shareholder return. So they're publicly traded, they have margins built in, that then passes down to their stockholders on that publicly traded side. Hoosier Energy is not publicly traded. Any excess margins that we produce over what our cost and other types of variables, we will actually give back to our distribution co-ops, to Henry County RMC, to Rush Shelby Energy, to Bartholomew County RMC. We will give them back in the form of patronage, or as Henry County often refers to it, capital credits back to our members. So that's a little bit of a difference there. We do have a strong focus on affordability. That's one of our key priorities in terms of any decision we make. How's it tied back to rates? How's it tied back to affordable energy for our member co-ops? Reliability, and now more than ever, reliability is important, whether it's in the winter or in the summer, in the fall or spring. We really try to tie our generation resources and our transmission investment so that reliability translates to our member co-ops and their member consumers. And then lastly, like I said, that collaboration of our co-ops in helping us plan for the future. It's definitely not a top-down initiative at Hoosier Energy where we tell our distribution co-ops how to do their business or what they should be doing. It's really a grassroots where the distribution co-op, like Henry County RMC, is really helping assist us in making decisions and guidance for the transition of the industry that's sped up faster than it's ever been in its history. So that's a little bit about the difference between investor owns. We all serve power. I think that's the common denominator, but the motives behind profit generation and margins are very different.
Absolutely. They are very different. And we love that co-op model, always keeping the members' interests at the forefront of our minds. And for our listeners who are curious, from our board of directors, it is Mr. Kurt Poor, who sits on the board at Hoosier Energy, who is our representative on that board. So when our members pay their bill here at Henry County REMC, what parts of that system are local and what parts are actually happening through Hoosier Energy or behind the scenes? Can you kind of shed some light on that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think a lot of us, as a consumer of energy myself, I always wonder when I write my bill every month or write that check to the co-op, to the utility, where does it go, right? And I think when you look at the big picture of the utility industry, you have to start at kind of the large scale. So Hoosier Energy is a load-serving entity. It's an acronym we use, LSE. But what it really means is that we have an obligation to serve energy to co-ops in our service territory. From that, we have generation plants, we have solar fields, we have wind turbines, we have natural gas, a variety that we'll discuss later. So there's a lot of cost in what we consider fuel as well as energy production. And then from there, you have kind of a step scale back to the end consumer. So you have large transmission lines that you see along highways in the middle of cornfields, very large transmission poles. Those will actually deliver power to what we call substations. Typically, you'll see these around industrial sites, high residential areas, fenced in transformers and all types of technology that the industry uses to step down power to a distribution level. Inside that substation is whenever Henry County REMC takes over from a lower side of a transformer that goes out onto their distribution lines. So smaller poles that you see along the side of county highways or county roads that typically have single phase or three phase, those are owned and operated by the distribution co-op. So we often look at that substation as kind of the delineation of where the cost really occurs, right? And how that transitions to distribution versus the big generation transmission side. And as a rule of thumb, primarily whenever a member consumer of Henry County pays their bill, it could range depending on how much they use or if they're an industrial customer or industrial member. But it's about 70-30 is typically where that falls, where 70% of those costs are from the fuel, the transmission, the substation, the maintenance, the planning. And then, sometimes it can be 25 to 30% is distribution on that bill. And so when you really look at it, when you make big decisions around generation or building a new transmission line, there are a lot of cost in that. But the benefit of the co-op model is it's not built for profit margin. It's built for reliability. It's built for affordability. And so that's a little bit of a breakdown that I would, it's going to depend on your usage as an end consumer, how much your bill is associated, whether you're high energy usage or a high demand user. But that's generally a rule of thumb that we often say.
Very good. Thank you for that. I think that was a great breakdown. And I will note for members who are interested in some of the finer details of the bill and when they look at their bill and what's what, they can check out our new Member Resource Center on our website. And we do explain some of those things, the PCA tracker, what demand means. We've got some great resources there for really digging in to some of those nuances and differences when it comes to billing. In practical terms, what does the partnership between Henry County REMC and Hoosier Energy look like week to week, month to month?
Yes, it is definitely a collaboration. If you've ever get a chance to look at Henry County REMC's website, I'm sure they have the cooperative principles posted there. One of the cooperative principles is cooperation among co-ops, and we take that to heart. So our interaction with Henry County, you say week to week, month to month, it's probably day to day a lot of times.
Yeah.
Whether that's a project that we're working on together, we're building a new substation, or we're trying to serve a large commercial load, or we're just doing safety training. So Hoosier Energy offers a variety of services to its member co-ops that can range from power quality concerns that a large commercial user may have. We can assist with that. We do key account training. We do safety and lineman courses. So Hoosier Energy actually offers an economies of scale, you could say, version of an apprenticeship program that Henry County REMC linemen, meter techs, as well as a variety of other types of training in that heats. It's a Hoosier Energy Apprenticeship and Training and Safety program. So I would say week to week, month to month, we have a lot of coordination, whether it's on the energy side or the services side. It really does come down to being there for the member, just as Henry County is there for the member consumer. We have that same relationship on a monthly basis.
Absolutely. I know I've been lucky enough to benefit from some of the great training opportunities, professional development opportunities that are facilitated through Hoosier Energy, leadership training. They sent me to OSHA 30-hour training. So
A blast, yes.
it was a blast. And for somebody who manages communications and marketing, you might be like, OSHA, why? But it's good for those in communications roles and who do what I do to know to learn as much as they can about all ends of the industry.
One of our goals is that, from a scale where we have 17 distribution co-ops, and there are going to be 17 different communicators, much like yourself. one of the goals is that if we can offer a training or a service, and I mentioned economies of scale earlier, if we can offer that to 17, the price point per individual drastically reduces. So for a Henry County REMC staff member to go out and secure an OSHA 30 training offsite, travel, all that, it does make a difference if you can offer it with a collective to reduce the cost for everyone. And again, going back to affordability, how do we continually push that narrative is one of our big initiatives.
Absolutely. So Blake, you mentioned substations, and we are very excited because our members in our Harrisburg area have dealt with some reliability issues for quite some time. For the most part, a lot of those have been out of our hands as far as us being able to directly and immediately address those because of the nature of the Harrisburg substation. So Hoosier Energy is going to be building a new substation that is going to drastically improve reliability for those members. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. So one of the neat things about working very closely with our distribution co-ops, Henry County included, is that when you hear from member consumers about issues they're having, reliability concerns, I mentioned at the very beginning, we talked about affordability, reliability, right? And there are focuses. And with the Harrisburg substation, we had seen drastic reduction in reliability, whether that was long-term outages or continual outages. And so working with Henry County REMC, we identified a plan going forward where we're actually building a new substation near Falmouth that will replace that aging Harrisburg substation. One of the interesting things about the electric grid is not every one of the Hoosier Energy owned substations. So we own 326 substations across southern Indiana and southeastern Illinois. In that range, the 320 range, not every substation is fed by a Hoosier Energy owned transmission line. The way the grid was set up, early years, transmission was built to feed certain areas, and then we would interconnect with other utilities like AES or Duke Energy, Ameren, Centerpoint. We interconnect with those at some of our substations. This new Falmouth substation that we will be building in that area will be connected to a much greater reliable Duke Energy transmission line. And so having that availability of high reliability, more contingency plans around outages is going to make a big difference for the consumers in that region, and be a huge benefit to Henry County REMC.
Yes, we are all so appreciative that we have reached the point we have with that project, and that's moving forward. And we can't wait. We're very excited for our members. Blake, in what different ways does Hoosier Energy add value to a member co-op like us? Rates, reliability planning, programs, innovation?
Yes. One of the biggest things that I think comes away from this, and I've talked about a little bit earlier, is economies of scale. In reliability planning and innovation, you have to be willing to test and pilot and go out and kind of like test the waters with some of these new technologies. I think for the last 40 years, 50 years, our industry was pretty stagnant. We had slow growth. There was, post 1940s, you had a large intake of members back then, and then it kind of stayed, the same. You had large generators, you had big transmission lines, small distribution line, and you get to the consumer. In today's industry, there is so much money being invested, whether that's through federal grants or private institutions, looking at how do we innovate in the industry and become more, less carbon intensive, more energy efficient. And I think the value that Hoosier Energy as a generation transmission utility co-op provides for member co-ops is we can do that across 17 members. We can do that across all of Southern Indiana, where not all the cost to try and test and innovate is focused on one set of members, right? It's not just focused on Henry County and Newcastle or Louisville. Like, you guys aren't bearing all the cost for those, which in turn keeps rates low for everyone, right? And I think when you have a stable rate, but you're able to innovate, you're able to be out in front in the news a little bit, testing things, that's where Hoosier Energy becomes a big part in that. The other piece is, we've already talked about the Harrisburg substation and that project. In reliability planning, again, we have the ability to look strategically out 5, 10, 15 years, address upcoming concerns well in advance of those. So from a system-wide perspective, the solution may not come from right here in Henry County. It could come from Rush County or Decatur County or Bartholomew County, because we're all interconnected into one grid here in the Midwest. We're all part of one large intercontinental system. So whenever we help each other, I think that benefits the smaller region. And where we look at Henry County REMC, that's where we see the greatest value of a G&T right now. And I touched on rates a little bit. I think one of the big things too is in a state of where you see it's a topic of discussion at the State House. It's a topic of discussion with our presidential administration. Rates are important to people. And as consumers, you and I, we don't like to see any change in that, right? And so the goal of having a larger base to invest keeps those rates stable over the long term.
Very good. Blake, there have been some really big initiatives, projects, purchases, big news at Hoosier over the last year or two. So let's get into some of those very exciting developments. Hoosier Energy and Wabash Valley Power Alliance finalized a joint purchase of St. Joseph Energy Center. Can you tell us a bit about that purchase, about St. Joe Energy Center, and how this is going to benefit members?
Yes. And so a little bit of clarity too on Wabash Valley Power Alliance. They're a generation transmission co-op, just like us, a G&T. They serve pretty much north of I-70, northern Indiana. They have a little bit of it in Illinois as well. And so they are very similar in terms of structure, very similar in terms of membership. And so that partnership for years has been very beneficial to Hoosier's members and Hoosier Energy. We actually co-own another natural gas site in Illinois called the Holland Generating Station. So when we talk about St. Joseph's, very similar structure, a lot of the same types of contractual language. And this purchase is in New Carlisle, Indiana, so up near South Bend. And really, this is a benefit to us, not only in the short term, but in the long term. It's 720 megawatts of natural gas combined cycle. And I know there's a lot of words there. When I say combined cycle, that is very beneficial because what it does is you will actually combust the gas to spin a turbine to create energy. You then use the heat recovery off of that process to then spin a second generator. So that's when I say combined cycle, you're getting really two forms of energy production off of one plant. It has very high thermal efficiency. And so that plant is going to be split 50-50 with the Wabash Valley Generation Transmission Co-op and Hoosier Energy. And when you start looking at what that means for reliability and cost stability, this plant was built in 2018. So we're only going in our 8th year of production at this point, very, very new. And it has a 99% reliability factor, which means it's very rarely off, especially on a cold day like today in February. And then it also has a 90% capacity factor. And I don't want to get hung up on what the factors mean, but being in the upper echelons of the 90s is a very beneficial plant. It means it runs a lot and it runs very efficiently. And so when you provide that into the market and you provide that reliable energy to our consumers, it drastically increases things we can do with our portfolio into the future as well.
Very good. Exciting stuff. Moving on to the next big project I'd like to discuss. Not so many years ago, people probably would not have guessed that this would be a reality or that this would be happening. But Hoosier is connected to the Palisades Nuclear Power Plant restart effort. So let's talk about that Michigan nuclear facility, what it is, what's going on there, and what is Hoosier Energy's role with the Palisades?
Yes. So the Palisades Nuclear Plant was on its way to being decommissioned. Early 2020, so 2020, 2021, 2022, it had been deemed to go into retirement. It had been operating since 1971. It's 810 megawatts of nuclear production, just like a typical nuclear plant. One of the things that was occurring was that during that process, it had been shut down and was getting ready to be torn down. A company called Holtec came out and they were actually going to decommission the plant. They were approached by another G&T, so we're going to use another cooperation among co-ops, another G&T in Michigan called Wolverine Power. So Wolverine approached Holtec, asked, what would happen if we restarted this? How would this look? What would it take? What type of partnerships would you need? They were very interested, but they needed a second off-taker of energy. And so Wolverine and Hoosier Energy began discussing we ultimately signed a contract, a 30-year purchase power agreement. So we do not own the plant. We don't have any operation requirements. We don't have any ownership ability of that plant. But what it does is it allows Holtec, the owners and operators, to restart the plant, go through the process, go through all the regulatory components, and then have an off-taker of energy whenever it comes online. So right now, you're looking at about 45 to 46% of the energy coming off of that plant coming to Hoosier. The remainder is going to Wolverine Power up in Michigan. And you may ask, I know you said, what are we doing in Michigan, right? We're in Indiana. We serve power to Newcastle, Louisville, the Henry County members. I talked a little bit earlier about a large grid. So Michigan is most of Michigan is part of the same grid that we are. It's called MISO. It's the Mid-Intercontinental System Operator. It's a regional transmission operator. A lot of acronyms. We're a part of the same grid. So when we buy power from Michigan, from this plant, it goes just as if it were in our backyard here in southern Indiana. So that's huge. That plant itself will employ about 600 staff full-time when it's fully operational. A lot of high-paying, about half union jobs. So very good economic builder for that community on something that was going to be torn down, right? And I think that for Hoosier Energy, again, it reduced our carbon emissions by 4.1 million tons when it comes online, which is about 966,000. That's just shy of 1 million gas cars. So our carbon reduction by signing on to that purchase power agreement is going to be massive for our portfolio.
Wow, that is absolutely fascinating. Nuclear, the word, the idea of it can be very polarizing. So how do you talk about or address safety, reliability concerns with members in a way that's transparent?
Yes, we've all heard the stories. And I think what we have to remember is that for every nuclear plant that's in operation, the percent of any issues is very, very small. The nuclear plant up there I mentioned has 600, and so we'll have 600 full-time employees, very high accredited. The regulatory commissions that are in charge of restarting these, right, are tied into every daily task. And I think as we go through this restart and Holtec manages that process of getting the plant online, there are a lot of steps, a lot of red tape, a lot of things to cross. And as we work through that, we feel very confident that once it's up and running, prior to 2021, it had a 99% capacity factor, which means it was getting a lot of accreditation from the markets, had a high reliability. Now they do have refilling where they have to refuel the reactors and different things, but there's really a large piece of this that the spent fuel off of nuclear plants is very small. We assume there's mass acres of spent fuel, but it's extremely small. And we're very confident this plant has a long history of running very efficiently. So that's kind of our communication. Again, it's going to be a very low carbon facility that produces a ton of energy for both Michigan and Indiana consumers.
Very good. Thank you for that. Great information. So let's say we fast forward a few years, 5, 10 years. What would you say that success looks like for Hoosier Energy, its members, when it comes to the Palisades effort?
Yes, one of the big things that we have has already taken place is the Palisades nuclear effort has already received commitment from the federal government for significant funding. The Department of Energy has a $1.52 billion loan to Holtec to restart this program, very low interest loan to get this program up and running. And then Hoosier Energy actually received a grant termed New Era. So that New Era grant from the USDA, U.S. Department of Agricultural Rural Utilities Service, is actually a $675 million grant that will start to flow in as energy is produced. And so that is not a loan. That is a full grant that will be given, right into our membership and being able to reduce costs across the system. So what 5 to 10 years looks like is we really want to see Palisades be a staple in our portfolio of how we produce energy. We continue to then add bits and pieces. If we go back 15 years, we had very large generating assets. We only had a couple. And so we were very segmented on one large plant or two large plants. Going forward, we love the idea of having multiple different types of energy, whether it's natural gas, nuclear, wind, solar, all the above strategy, and diversifying that across multiple sites so you're not so concentrated in one area with a high shaft risk, where if one generator goes down, now all of a sudden your entire system's at risk, right? So we love that ability, and that's going to be kind of a goal of ours, is to continue to diversify, but also have the ability to look and say, hey, Palisades and St. Joe's are two large staples. The Holland plant that we already own, the big staples of our portfolio, but then we have all these different pieces that diverse risk and cost across our membership.
Absolutely. You never want to put all of your eggs in one basket.
Exactly, yes.
We're getting close here to wrapping up this very interesting conversation. Blake, can you tell me one thing that you're most excited about at Hoosier Energy right now?
Yes, I think with the leadership of our Hoosier Energy CEO and senior staff, as well as the leadership of our board of directors, which includes, again, Henry County REMC and the managers of each co-op. So Melissa True here at Henry County REMC. I think with that leadership set and all the staff, Andrea, you and I'm really excited for this continued collaboration. So we have a large integrated planning initiative underway at Hoosier Energy to see how do we work better with our distribution co-ops? How do we proceed and add innovation without raising costs? And how do we add, the ability to do more with less, I think is a huge thing right now, right? As you look across the utility industry, it's how do we hit that next frontier at an affordable cost? And so I'm really excited about that. Hoosier Energy has done a great job over the last, I've only been here 6 years, but has done a great job in that time frame of being forward thinking, strategic, but member focused. And I think so often we forget that the end of the line consumer is ultimately who we serve across the industry. Hoosier Energy has that focus all the time. Henry County RMC has that focus all the time. But when you look across the country, what really matters is that end electron that gets to the person on the end of the line. I grew up on a farm, very rural area. And when you have an outage or you can't guarantee power, it affects multiple animals. My dad's calves, his cows, right? Like people's livestock, their families. And so keeping that at the front of mind is the thing I'm most excited about. Hoosier has a history of that with our distribution co-ops. And I only think it's going to grow as we move into the future.
Awesome. This has been a very insightful conversation. I appreciate you sharing everything you shared. I think it was a great overview of Hoosier Energy, of our partnership, some great initiatives going on, and the history there. And just thank you for sharing everything you did. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come talk to us and talk to the listeners of the Power Hour.
Thank you, Andrea, for allowing me to come visit you at Henry County REMC. It's a beautiful area, even though there's quite a few inches of snow still on the ground. I was excited to join you today. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great rest of your day and a safe journey home.
Thank you.
And now it's time for this month's REMC wrap-up. Are you interested in being on the Henry County REMC Board of Directors? Director candidate packets are now available at our office. This year, seats are open to nominations in Districts 1, 3, 5, and 6. Your district number is listed on your bill under the office hours, or you can find it in SmartHub. Do you have or know a sixth grader who would enjoy horseback riding, canoeing, ziplining, archery, swimming, and more? Henry County REMC is still accepting applications for this summer's Camp Kilowatt. Visit campkilowatt.org to learn more and apply. The REMC team would like to remind you that meter tampering is dangerous, illegal, and not worth it. Don't break a seal, open a meter base, or let anyone but REMC crews handle your meter. We are here to help. If you are struggling with your bill, please give us a call at 1-800-248-8413 or email hcremc@hcremc.com. A reminder that Henry County REMC members can apply for various rebates from our rebate program facilitated by Hoosier Energy. You can get rebates for HVAC, electric lawn equipment, and heat pumps. Visit our website to learn more. And that wraps up this episode of the podcast. Thanks for joining us for the Power Hour with Henry County REMC, where we don't just provide power, we empower.